me today is a special guest from Baseball America, Peter Flaherty.
Here with Peter Flaherty, Baseball America.
Welcome back to another episode of the Baseball America College Baseball Podcast. I'm joined again by my co-host, Peter Flaherty.
It was a masterclass in every sense of the word, but this is as good as you're going to see at the amateur level. It's hard to even articulate how good it is because I don't think any phrasing or any words could properly do it justice, like to how incredible it was.
We're back to baseball today. We are back to baseball today, and if you're watching on YouTube, it will look a little bit different. I'll explain that in a second. But Peter Flaherty of Baseball America will be joining us. It's I guess officially MLB Draft Week, so we'll be talking to him about the Tigers farm system, players that are highly sought after in this upcoming draft. Who's the best player who's going to have the best career? And I do ask, obviously, keeping it local, a lot of Tiger questions about their current player development and some guys that they drafted several years back who are still trying to continue to find success at the big league level. If you are watching on YouTube, first off, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Might look a little bit different today. The interview, due to some technical difficulties on my part, was recorded on Zoom, so you might not get a chance to see this gorgeous face, which I'm sure to some people will make the episode more enticing. But Austin will do his thing. He'll just say, you'll have the picture over there. You'll hear my audio. Audio comes in great. Everything else comes in fine. But most of our listens are on in audio form anyway, so you can find us there on Apple Podcasts. You can find us there on Spotify. And, of course, I'm on Twitter at Castellani2014 and CastellaniContent.com. There you can find everything that Austin and I create. That thing is getting updated every single day with Tiger postgame videos. I'll say this episodes, Chris and Company episodes. We continue to pump out the content. So, yeah, if you like baseball talk, you've come to the right place for this episode. Let's get to our interview with Peter Flaherty. Peter Flaherty of Baseball America joins us on the program today. As of the time of this recording, fresh off of an Omaha trip. How many trips to Omaha have you made now for the College World Series?
That's now 2 trips to Omaha. So, I mean, I know you've been yourself. Mm-hmm. It's kind of an experience unlike anything else. I hate to use the cliche of, you have to go to see what it's like, or you just had to be there. But it really does fit the description. I mean, it is as cool as it gets. It is kind of just like baseball heaven for 2+ weeks. And it's always really, really cool. And I couldn't be more fortunate that I'm able to go out there.
It really is. And having been there, I share all of those sentiments, my friend. That's kind of what I wanted to start with, because I find, first of all, I just think that it's just so charming to have it at a place like Omaha, and not Los Angeles or somewhere in Florida or New York. I think it's such a unique location. But if you could, because even I've had trouble putting my finger on it, what is it that makes that particular event in that particular city work as well as it does?
Man, that's a great question. I think to your point, I love the fact that it's in Omaha and not sort of not to, make a backhanded compliment, I guess, towards Omaha, but I'd rather have it there in a nice Midwest city than, like you said, in LA, Miami, sort of a glitzier, more glamorous city. And I think that's part of the charm and what makes it special. It sort of feels like, again, for 2 weeks, that all of the eyes of the baseball world and all of the diehard baseball fans of the 8 programs and more kind of converge upon this small city right in the heart of America. And, they're watching the greatest game on earth. And I think that's what makes it so special. Obviously, every year you get 8 really good teams, and you get, on an individual level, you get a number of really talented players. But I think the tradition of it, and again, just sort of everyone converging and coming together, sort of making this baseball, making it the baseball mecca, and baseball pilgrimage, so to speak. I think that's what makes it, or part of what makes it, really, really special.
Yeah, and that's a good way to put it. I like the word pilgrimage there to kind of describe it, because it is a fascinating thing right in the middle of in the heart of kind of middle America, and it's one of the few venues that I can think of, championship venues, that never changes. It's Final Four's in a different place every year, Super Bowl's in a different place every year. No, it's very specific to that location. I think it's awesome. But I want to just kind of take a step back and ask about college baseball in general, because I think that any person that I've come across, and I've been a part of this kind of audience as well, doesn't have a huge exposure to college baseball. But the hit rate when they do get exposed to it, whether it's on television or in person, the approval rating is very high. It is a different game. It is, I would argue, especially in the postseason, a more intense game. Of course, obviously, with it being college, it's more regionalized, but it's a game that I feel like people, when people watch, it's got, like I said, this solid approval rating, but it remains kind of this, except for those 2 weeks in Omaha, kind of this niche thing. Do you think that college baseball will remain that way, or do you think that there's a chance for it to kind of break through more into the mainstream and become kind of that third, legitimate revenue producing sport, depending on the location, behind football and basketball in college?
Yeah, it's a good like you said. I mean, it seems like every year, especially in the last, I'm not sure, 3 to 5 plus years, when ESPN does their graphic of viewership after the College World Series or any major event that they do. It seems like the College World Series numbers have been excellent and just kind of keep building off of one another, I guess. But I think there is a chance that it could break through this, sort of glass ceiling that it's currently contained within. I think it's in a great spot right now. The game is growing, and I think it's going to only continue to grow. And I mean, you've seen it year to year with the interest that everyone has, and I guess with the NIL era, and in terms of revenue generating, programs are investing more, or schools are investing more into not only their athletics departments but their baseball programs. We see it across the country. It's sort of like an adapt or die mindset, really, with all of NIL, but college baseball as well. Like, there have been serious investments made. Some programs more than others, obviously, but you even saw it with Coastal Carolina in the College World
Yeah.
Series. It was very strategic and very smart. They put up I think it was a QR code to their prospect camp, or like open invite camp, where kids could sign up and go, and they showed it in the dugout. I think they got numerous signups off of that. And I think in general, to use another kind of cliche, the trend right now is college baseball's friend. So I love the direction in which it's headed. I'm obviously biased towards it being in a really good spot, but
Yeah.
yeah, I do think it's headed it's already in a great spot. I think it's only going to get better.
Yeah, and I always I'm glad you brought up NIL, because I always ask people who are involved in college athletics in some capacity about it, because in my stance on NIL is I'm all for players getting paid money off their name, image, likeness. I think that what's become of it, at least in football and basketball, is this kind of rich get richer thing, where it's like free agency in baseball, where if you have the money to spend, you spend it on big players. Guys will leave, go to bigger programs, what have you. Do you feel like it's in a better place when it comes to college baseball, or do you just think that it's a sport that lends itself to more parity, therefore the issue isn't quite as huge as it is in football?
Yeah, so it's an issue. First, I'm with you. Like, 1,000,000% college
Hmm.
athletes should be and deserve to be getting paid. But I think the current nature of the game, especially as it pertains to the transfer portal, it's kind of like the wild, wild west. And I think it just
Yeah.
needs some sort of regulating to kind of, bring this thing in a little bit. But I think with NIL in college baseball, I think, again, it goes back to the transfer portal. Like, there is rampant tampering. Programs will call guys that aren't even in the portal and say, hey, we'll give you this amount of money if you get in the portal, and subsequently commit to us. There's back channel communication, just given the involvement of agents and advisors. They'll reach out to the kid's parents. Like, if they want to get to a kid and talk to a kid, even if he's not in the transfer portal, like, they'll find a way to do it. So that happens before kids even hop in. Sometimes it'll drive and motivate kids to jump in the portal. Other times it won't. So I just think there needs to be some sort of rules and regulations around it, not necessarily a complete like crackdown, but to kind of eliminate and really discourage against tampering as much as possible. I think that's the key. And then you didn't even ask about the transfer portal, but with the transfer portal, I think there just needs to be, we can't have like 6,000 kids jumping in there every year. Like it's insane. There will be kids who are playing and starting or have a prominent role at their respective program. And they'll go in and just by the sheer numbers, like they'll end up committing to a school and they won't play.
Right.
So they're hurting themselves. And yeah, so I think that it's good for the game, obviously, NIL, and it's great for the kids. I just think we gotta just a couple of rules tweaks and we're right there and back in a good spot.
And I think it's the same with the portal as well, where like on paper, if like, people bring it up all the time, if coaches are allowed to leave, players should be allowed to leave, and I respect that. I also think the insanity that we've gotten into of when you include high school, seeing guys who've played 8 different schools in 8 different years is that's something I don't think it's good for fandom, and I don't think it's really particularly good for any sport. I think, and this will be the last college baseball question I have for the at least for the time being, or actually second to last, sorry. But I think that one of the big issues that has plagued college baseball is even more so than football and basketball is the regionalism of it all, and the fact that there is, it's a huge deal in the South, right? It's a huge deal in the SEC and the Big Ten, or some of these, schools or some of these conferences. My apologies. That play. I mean, let's be real, in colder weather. I mean, when doesn't get warm till late May, are kind of at a disadvantage. I mean, Michigan made it to the College World Series and almost won it in 19. I know Indiana made it with Schwarber. Besides that, I don't think it's only happened, I believe, twice since 1984. But now it's less regionalized because you have UCLA and Michigan playing in the same conference, and you have these teams that have kind of merged. Do you think that the merging of the conferences and having West Coast teams playing, quote, East Coast conferences could lead to potentially more parity as they're kind of, all playing each other around the same time?
Yeah, I think it definitely helps a little bit. The Southeast region, and I guess furthermore, the SEC, I think is always going to reign supreme just in terms of, who people would say is the premier conference or premier region in the sport. But like you said, UCLA, both this year they had a great run to Omaha. And next year, heading into 26, there's a chance they might be the preseason #1 team in the country. And then you have other premier programs out west, Oregon, Stanford. Stanford's had a down couple of years, but they had a stretch from 2022 to 2024 where they went to Omaha 3 straight years. I guess Duke and North Carolina, that falls into the Southeast region, but there are programs in every corner of the country and in every region that have Omaha type of capability and Omaha type of upside year in and year out. So I think that regionally and nationally, it isn't so much, especially as in years past, and it's trended this way more recently. I don't think all of the talent on a team level and on an individual level, I don't think it's so much isolated now in the Southeast and SEC.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that, that Michigan run in 19, and obviously me being a Michigan fan going back to it, was so improbable for what it was, considering, kind of the things they had against them and the conference that they came from. I think it's more likely that we're going to see kind of a mix. And while I'm not huge on conference expansion, at least in the other sports, I do think that it can lead to a little bit more competition. Last question about the NCAA tournament here. As somebody who evaluates players and focuses on the draft the way you do, who's one guy who you think stock rose the most during this postseason, whether it was Omaha or just the NCAA tournament in general?
Yeah, so I'll give you 2 guys. They're both pitchers. The first, he was already in a really prominent spot just based off of how he had thrown all year, especially in SEC play. But Cade Anderson from LSU was exceptional in 2 starts. I think across 16 innings in Omaha, he struck out 17 and allowed 1 run. How I like to look at guys, it's like how many buckets do they fit into and how many positive buckets do they fit into. With Cade Anderson, it's really, really high-end stuff. I mean, he's got 3+ pitches with a an above average fastball with plus carry in the zone. Check. Quality of strikes are there. Check. So, I mean, you've got strikes and stuff. He's got a projectable, wiry, dare I say, even kind of thin body that you can add 10, 15 plus pounds to. So there's still more upside to tap into and a ceiling to achieve. Check. And 4, he's left-handed. So, I mean, you're 4 for 4 right there. He showed well on the biggest stage in college baseball. And we've talked about now, guys can make themselves some money on this stage. We saw it with Cade Horton with Oklahoma, propel himself into a top 10 overall selection. Cade Anderson was already viewed in this really prominent light, so a little bit less to a degree than Cade Horton. Well, both Cades. But yeah, I think Cade Anderson now propelled himself into the 1-1 conversation and is now much more of a candidate to go first overall than he was 2 weeks ago. But yeah, he's a really, really special pitcher. He's personally my starting pitcher 1 in this year's draft class. I kind of find it to be sort of a no-brainer. I've long been on the Cade Anderson train, so he showed really well. And then the second is Gage Wood from Arkansas. Obviously headlined by not only one of the best pitching performances in College World Series history, but one of the best you'll see at the amateur level. 9-inning no-hitter, hit a guy, which was his lone base runner of the game, struck out 19, just exceptional. And he was a guy that I had kind of had pegged and we at Baseball America had pegged as someone that fits into that, fits the description of, who could really take off in Omaha and enjoy more of a Cade Horton like ascension. And, he might not go 8th overall, but for me, he certainly played himself squarely into the first round discussion. I'd find it hard to believe that he gets out of the first round right now. He's another advanced strike thrower, but the fastball with him, it's a double plus pitch. With big time life in the top of the zone. The metrics under the hood on it are really, really good. He gets a ton of swing and miss, gets a ton of chase, pairs it with a bigger breaking ball, with a ton of depth and downward bite. That's a plus pitch. It also is a whiff getter. Third pitch is kind of under construction right now, but I think it's, he'll flash a shorter slider. That's a fine third pitch. That's kind of the least of his concern. So, I think he ends up going in the first when all is said and done.
I'm really glad that both of the guys you just talked about were pitchers, because it leads me to kind of a grander issue that I want to discuss. And I don't know how much knowledge you have on the medical side of things specifically, but I think it's fair to say that arm issues and arm blowouts have become an epidemic in today's baseball. And I don't think I'm out of line for saying that. We had more Tommy John surgeries last year than we did in the entire 90s decade. And these things continue. And I feel almost bad as a fan that I've reached this pessimistic point where we have these guys that are drafted. You bring up, Cade Anderson or Cade Horton, these guys who have really ridiculous stuff. You can even go back to Paul Skeens a few years back, who's like the ultimate example. But I would say kind of, I don't know if he started it necessarily, but kind of going back to Strasburg when he was picked. Every time I see these guys who get called up that have ridiculous stuff, that have the, high velo fastballs that spin the ball really effectively, in the back of my head, I feel like I can't properly evaluate them until that inevitable early career Tommy John surgery. I wish that I didn't look at things that way, but I feel like given how frequent these things have become, that's kind of the it's an understandable pessimism. Do you feel like there's any way going forward, starting whether in college or the youth level, to kind of slow the curve or weaken the curve in terms of these arm injuries? Or do you feel like the way that these guys are taught, maximum spin, maximum velo, going to drive line when they're 13 years old, that the dog is just out of the leash, and this is something that baseball is going to have to deal with for the next several decades?
So how I kind of view it, and it sounds like we might view it in a little bit of a similar way, but I kind of look at it as, everyone's going to get it at some point, whether it's in college, as they're ascending through pro ball, after they make their big league debut, whenever it is, like I feel like, it's almost kind of a box that they're going to have to check now, more or less. And obviously, a number of guys won't end up getting it and sort of be an anomaly. But yeah, I'm kind of with you where, it feels like at this point, almost everyone is going to get it. And with Cade Anderson, he already got it. And he's back post TJ. Gage Wood had a shoulder injury, but to your initial question, yeah, I mean it's been pretty alarming to see the rise in arm injuries and rise in Tommy John surgery. And yeah, I just kind of feel like it's now almost a box that pitchers are checking off at some point during their career. And to your point about youth baseball, like I think that specializing in one sport is so stupid before the age of, I don't know, 16, 15,
Yeah, I would
16,
agree. The
17
high
years
school age,
old.
yeah.
Like just have fun and play football in the fall, hoops in the winter. And then you play baseball in the spring, or even if it's like you play football in the fall, you take the winter off and focus on baseball and building up. But whatever it is, like have fun and play multiple sports and enjoy that.
Yeah, it's very disappointing. And you mentioned Anderson obviously already having had it, and it's such a bizarre kind of, you'd almost argue, bass backwards way of looking at it, where I almost view it as an advantage when I've already seen that a young pitcher has had Tommy John. I mean, our organization in Detroit has the prime example of that. Tarek Skubal is the best pitcher in the world, fell in the 9th round because he was coming back from Tommy John surgery. It's kind of a weird, anomaly where you almost view it as, okay, well, it's out of the way. They've checked off that box, whereas somebody like, on the other end of things, like Casey Mize went 1-1 for us in 2018, gets through, gets Tommy John in 22, basically misses two full seasons. It's a bizarre thing. It'd be like, I've used this analogy before. It'd be like if every running back in the NFL tore their ACL at some point. It's a strange, sad kind of rite of passage that's become of pitchers, and you hate to see it, but I think it's just, I don't believe that organizations, I'm not going to say they don't care, they obviously care, but I think that it's going to continue as long as what they kind of preach is what they preach. I mean, I think this stuff just isn't really sustainable over a long period of time. Moving on to kind of player, and we've been talking about the draft a little bit, but more player evaluation and player development, and that kind of leads to our brings things back around to our main audience here in Detroit, because the thing that we have heard ad nauseum since Scott Harris arrived is the development and retaining of good young players. That's what they've been wanting to do ever since he showed up. It's been what the good organizations have done for the last few decades that have allowed them to be really successful, whether it's Atlanta, Houston, what have you. And look, there's been times in my life not that long ago where the Tigers had, on paper, great farm systems that ended up being okay in the major leagues. And there's been times in which they had good farm systems and they amounted to something. I mean, I think their current crop of young players is very enticing. I'll ask you about a few of those guys in a minute. But the question that it leads me to is, in your mind, in your evaluation, what is more important in the draft? The player who gets drafted or the organization that develops them?
It's a great question. And not to take like a Humpty Dumpty type of stance where I just sort of sit on a fence. I think it's a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that, the player's talent and ability and tools are really, really important and will get that player really far in his respective career. But I think in terms of achieving and reaching that ultimate upside and achieving that player's respective ceiling, I think a lot of credit goes to, each organization's respective player development departments and, how they develop guys. So they work with hitters, how they work with pitchers, how they develop stuff, shapes, make tweaks to a hitter's operation, whatever it is. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think the players like now tools and now skill set gives way to the player development departments, ownability. Like I think one developmental pairing, especially on the pitching side, that's become pretty prominent. People equate the Mariners, and rightfully so, with a really high ability to develop arms. So like we even see it this year with, talking about which arm early on could be a good fit for Seattle. Houston's a very data-driven team. That's more just with how they draft. But no, I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, and I think it really. I talked to Foolish Baseball about this a while back, and he mentioned the Mariners in the sense that there's certain organizations who just know what they do right, and I think the Mariners are a prime example of they know what they're doing with their pitching. And I think in general, more often than not, Detroit's had a pretty good approach when it comes to the development of pitchers. But Scott Harris has been here for almost 3 calendar years, and we've never had a farm system of position players this deep. And keep in mind, we went a 4-year stretch where we were just tanking for draft capital, which kind of takes me to my next question, which is how do you feel about the draft lottery? Do you feel like it's something that it was necessary? I can't imagine it changes the evaluation of players, but do you feel like it was something that was good for the game, or is it kind of a take it or leave it thing for you?
Yeah, I don't really feel too strongly about it one way or another. I think, even if it isn't a whole lot of eyes, I think it, the lottery night, whenever they announce the picks, I think it brings some more eyes to the game and some more interest to the draft. And it's clear they're trying to, you know, get more interest into it. So I don't really feel super passionately about it one way or another, which I guess in my mind means to keep it, because it's like teams aren't going to be tanking for draft picks.
Yeah.
None of that. So I kind of like it.
And that was, yeah, and you keep kind of leading into my next question, so which I appreciate. But you brought up tanking, because I think that this is, I would say it started originally in the NBA. I could be wrong with that. I don't want to know what the inception of tanking was, of this idea of like, if we can back our way into a generational player, the chances of us turning this organization around a lot quicker, pretty high. Baseball, it's much different. There's a minor league system. There's a developmental system. It's very rare, even if you get a guy that you hit with like a Paul Skeens, that it's going to immediately turn your organization around. Do you think that pre-draft lottery, like tanking, was a real thing in Major League Baseball, or do you feel like it was just an excuse for teams to put out weak products?
I'm not really sure how prominent tanking really was or is in Major League Baseball. I mean, there were certainly a number of teams, and some more so than others, that would constantly be picking towards the top of the draft.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily think the ownership groups and the higher ups, the general manager, the high ranking officials in the scouting department, I don't think that they were necessarily, excuse me, using that as a crutch to kind of put out a less than stellar, we'll leave it at that, product on the field. I think everyone's goal at the end of the day is to try and win and do whatever it is they can in their power to help their organization and help their team dogpile at the end of this whole thing. So yeah. I think that some teams went about that in different ways than others, in ways that were proven to not be effective and not work. But I don't really think that there was like rampant active tanking going on.
No, I don't think so. I think that there are, like in any line of work, I think that there are good owners and bad owners, and I think that there's teams that are more competitive than others. I don't know if anyone wakes up being like, I want to see how many games we can lose this year. I do think that there's guys that go about it the right way and that are just simply more competent than others are. But it's kind of a conversation for another day, I guess. Moving on, you brought up a few organizations, and like Houston and Seattle, and again, I'll go back to my interview with Foolish Baseball, where I asked him about the Rockies and like what in the world needs to happen for a team or an organization like that to really kind of get right and get out of the pit that they're in. And he mentioned with them specifically that they're an organization that needs to be, considering the altitude and the environment they play in, much more data driven than they are. When you are following along a player's development or an organization's developmental process, are there telltale signs to you that an organization may not know what they're doing in regards to player development?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious one, and it's, not really dropping any serious knowledge here, but if there's a consistent track record uh, of, guys kind of burning out
Yeah.
or being quote unquote busts, um, and just sort of missing the mark, when it comes to their draft picks. Like, you don't really know that until three, that might be conservative, 3 years down the road or 3 years post draft, 2 to 3 years. So, I mean, I think consistent, like, stagnation of prospects development, like the old saying goes, nothing changes if nothing changes. So,
Mhm.
um, if year to year with, whether it be their high end prospects, their prominent guys, or even just more depth guys in their system, if they're just kind of stagnant in their development track just kind of looks the same. That's kind of a telltale sign to me that, something might need to change here. And that translates to the major league level with, some of the homegrown guys that, they might bring up. They aren't effective big leaguers. They aren't, impact big leaguers. And you see that across a sustained sample. I think that's another sign. So, I think that you don't really have to dig deep for, at least on the surface, you don't have to dig deep for like these, indicators that organizations might not be the best, developmentally. I think that people can just kind of see it themselves with, the lack of performance. And, certainly some of that goes, on a respective player, in some cases. And there are certainly a number of players that fit the description of that. But I mean, if this is a consistent trend across the farm system, if this is a consistent trend, at the big league level, then you can potentially chalk it up to the lack of developmental prowess.
Yeah. And it's strange just because I've seen like locally here us go from a time where I completely trust or I didn't trust at all our organization's ability to develop, and now all of a sudden I just do. And I wanted to ask specifically about one organization in baseball because I think it's been 5, 6 years in a row now where if I look at farm system rankings, the team that is at the bottom pretty much every year is the Los Angeles Angels. And this is something that has transcended, I think, multiple regimes at this point. Like we very famously bring up the fact that they had Trout and Ohtani in their prime, but I mean, those guys obviously were never the problem. I think the problem exists in that player development system, which has just been struggling to put out legitimate prospects, even when they've had highly touted pieces. About them specifically, why can't they get off the mat? Like, what is the thing that they're not doing that has allowed them to be kind of stagnant for missing playoffs 11 years this year?
It's a good question too, because I mean, admittedly, I haven't, dove super, super deep, into the Angels farm system, but I mean, they have the worst record, I think, in every full season league that they're in,
Yeah,
which is, not a great stat. Like Salt Lake is the worst team in the PCL. Rocket City is, I think, dead last in the Southern League. Um, and then I think in high A, whatever their high A affiliate is, Tri-City it might be, is last in winning percentage in a 6-team league. Um, but yeah, I think that, some of it is attributed again to they've sort of taken on this reputation of really rushing and ascending guys,
yeah,
through professional baseball, and almost, it's been really interesting to watch because they are kind of one of one in how they do this, but, almost, again, they not making guys immediate big leaguers. That's speaking hyperbolically, but, Christian Moore only had, I think, like 300 minor league at bats
yeah.
before, being called up, to the Angels this year. Zach Neto, I think, oh, I wish I could pull the number off the top of my head, but, I think he even had less. I think he had like 230 minor league at bats. Nolan Schanuel, similar bucket to those two guys. I think Schanuel might have even been less than that. I
I
think he had
think
like
so.
75 minor league at bats before they pulled him up. So part of that goes to just how they bring up like guys that would normally be prospects for, a little while and maintain and retain their prospect status. They just make them big leaguers, and then they exhaust their prospect eligibility by getting 130 at bats. But I'm also with you. Developmentally, it has been interesting to watch. They're unorthodox and sort of how they do things. Not speaking to their development, speaking towards how they um, handle guys in the minor leagues and sort of rush them a little bit on the surface, which is a bold strategy because I mean, you know, baseball's a game. It'll kill you. It'll chew you
Yeah.
up and spit you out. So I mean, if you rush a guy and sort of kill his confidence in the majors before an eventual demotion to sort of get right, that could have sort of a lasting impact, throughout that kid's career, and he might never really be able to get right. So they're very interesting in how they do things.
I want to ask, and I know that you've been at Baseball America, what, 2 years now?
This is my third year.
Your third. Okay, so this the player I'm about to talk to was drafted before you started working there, but he was kind of a household name when he was in college and everything, and that's Spencer Torkelson, because you mentioned teams rushing guys to the big leagues. And I think that if you're looking for kind of a prime example of a guy who was probably mishandled to a certain extent coming out of the draft, I think Torkelson fits that mold, because we're talking about somebody who was a highly touted prospect, 1-1 in the draft. And I don't know how closely you followed his development, but from every level, high A to double A, triple A, it was the exact same thing. It was like not just bad, but not making contact for about 30, 40 at bats, then getting crazy hot, then plateauing a little bit, and then getting called up. He only played one full season in the minor leagues, and there's varying levels to my criticism, I guess, and people may push back on it. He was a negative WAR player his first 3 years in the big leagues, which is for a 1-1. I mean, I can't view it as anything other than a disappointment. Has been better this year, has driven in more runs, but it's a question that I've asked Detroit people, and it's a question that I've asked people who just work in baseball. What do you think was his biggest issue, both coming up through the minor leagues and his first few years in major league ball, that didn't allow for him to take off the way that people expected him to?
I think you hit on it when you're asking it, but the swing and miss and general hitability
Yeah.
and lack of adjustability probably are the roots of those so-called struggles. I think just picking up shapes and picking up spin out of the hand, or I guess the lack of ability to do that was a hindrance to his production. This year, I think he's been better in that regard, just from what I've seen and what I've watched. He's a plus power guy. That's sort of long been the read on him. I will say, admittedly, when he was coming out of Arizona State, and he went 1-1 in 2020. I was expecting him to hit more, both as he ascended through professional baseball and in Major League Baseball. But I think he's an impactful player for what he is. Again, the power's plus. The hit ability has been a little bit better this year. It's taken a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think to your initial question, for me, it was the sort of getting eaten alive by spin and secondaries and failing to pick up shapes out of the hand.
Yeah, I think that he's so boomer bust. The slug is there, the power numbers are there. I think it's kind of those in between at bats when he has trouble kind of grinding things out, where he is slumping a little bit. I mean, he's either red hot or he's been freezing cold really throughout his big league career. And of course, he was drafted in that COVID year draft, 5 rounds at the time, and we're still kind of accumulating data, several years later, half a decade later. But how much of an impact obviously we know COVID had an impact on that draft, but how much did it have on player development? Do you think that there was or player evaluation, I'm sorry. Do you think that there was a drastic shift in regards to how we evaluated guys coming into that draft pre-COVID as opposed to had we have not had COVID?
I think it's hard to say otherwise because, you're talking about what, like maybe a less than a month's sample of college games, and then really no high school sample at all. So, I mean, I find it almost impossible to believe that, if COVID didn't happen, the draft wouldn't look any different. So I mean, I think that in this world where COVID doesn't exist, I'm sure that the 2020 draft is shuffled around pretty drastically. I mean, you look at Garrett Crochet at 11, prime example, who went to the White Sox and was, an immediate big leaguer. He probably goes higher up. That 2020 Tennessee team was going to be really good, and he'd have been at the forefront of that rotation. So, I mean, you kind of wonder, how that would have looked as SEC play ramped up, and it's really hard and a dangerous game to assume anything happening in baseball, let alone any sport. But assuming he goes out and kind of did what he was looking like he was going to do, and sort of carve through the SEC, like he probably goes in a far more prominent spot. So yeah, I mean, I think that was a really difficult year for scouts and front office officials to try and put their best foot forward for a unique kind of one-of-one draft. It's almost an impossible scenario to be in, especially with some of the prep guys. With college, at least you have, a 1 or 2 year sort of track record to go off of, even though their junior year and draft year is the biggest of their respective college career. But it was an unenviable position to be in.
It's such a difficult question to ask just because it was in such a weird time, but do you still think Torque would have gone 1-1?
So at the time of everything getting banged in Corona, I think he was hitting like 340. He was walking twice as much as he struck out with 6 homers. I'm trying to think of who else could have gone 1-1. I'm sure Kjerstad.
Austin Martin was highly talked about at the time. Did Kjerstad go number 2?
Kjerstad went 2, and then I think it was Max Meyer, Asa Lacy, and then Austin Martin may have gone 5.
He did 5. I remember him dropping to 5. Yeah.
So, I mean, who's to say what would have happened if the remaining 3 months of the season played out? I mean, I'm sure that there was a chance that, a handful of players could have played their way into that discussion, whether it be Kjerstad, Martin, a handful of others. But I think that Torkelson, even heading into the year, and he showed it in the month, he was the leader in the clubhouse. But I'd have to dig in deeper to really properly answer the question.
Yeah, and it's I mean, like everything that came from COVID involving sports, there's giant what ifs. My hunch is that he still would have gone 1-1. I think that he'd established himself pretty far ahead of the pack at that point. And I mean, it was even when the Tigers were losing in 2019, they lost 114 games, got the number 1 pick. Even at the time, pre-COVID, there was this kind of belief of like it's going to end up being Torkelson. I don't know how closely you follow guys that are coming up, from high school, but the big name that's being talked about in the Tigers system right now, and he's become a household name in the minors, is Kevin McGonigal. Taken second. Yeah, okay, you're smiling, so I guess that's a number 1 sign that like, yeah, this is he's become a nationwide name. Obviously, the second pick in that draft by the Tigers following Max Clark, who went 3rd overall. Right now putting up just video game numbers in high A ball, will get called up here at some point. This is my standing, and part of it has to do with I trust the current system in place. To me, the best Tiger position player prospect of my life, got a lot of alliteration there, prospect of my lifetime. Based on what you've seen or what you've evaluated, what do you think of Kevin McGonigal?
So it's funny with Kevin. I used to actually work with the Yankees, and I was on their area code coaching staff, and so he played on the team that I had coached.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with the Yankees and a handful of other scouts. So he was on our team, and the infield was, he was at second, and Colt Emerson, who's now with the Mariners, was at shortstop. And Kevin has he's just hit at such a high level everywhere he has been. Like, I mean, it's to kind of use a cliche of one of my mentors. Like, he could wake up on Christmas morning and hit in a Santa suit. Like, he is the feel for the barrel has been exceptional, wise beyond his years for many years. And he's not this one trick pony where it's just kind of this contact merchant. There's impact in there. It's more gap to gap and extra base hit power than it is over the fence power, but the hit ability with him is just so impressive. The barrel sense, the bat to ball skills, the ability to generate quality contact, the approach and swing decisions. Like he is a major league hitter in every sense of the phrase, like no doubt plus hitter, not only currently, but I think as he continues to ascend through professional baseball and makes his eventual major league debut, I think he's going to be an impactful hitter at the big league level. Like he's a compact, physical kid. The bat speed is exceptional. Again, the feel for the barrel is outstanding. His feel for the barrel is really special. He gets it to all four quadrants of the zone. He can barrel up really any pitch. And it's at his level of barrel sense, it's almost like you either have it or you don't type of deal. He's very blessed to have it. He hammers the baseball and sprays line drives from foul line to foul line. I could go on and on. He's just a really special talent. I cannot believe that he made it to where he did in the draft. I couldn't believe it on draft night. I am even more floored now.
They couldn't believe it either, from what I've gathered. The Tigers couldn't. They got Clark with third overall. I don't think they ever expected McGonigal to fall to them where he did. Yeah, no, it's one of those things that he is the quintessential player that Scott Harris is looking for from the Tigers. His swing decisions are elite. I mean, that's been their main focus, is getting guys who dominate in the strike zone, and a guy that obviously they took in the same draft is Max Clark. And you have your evaluation of McGonigal. The evaluation of Clark has been a little bit mixed. I'm a bit more positive than some other people are. The fact is, there's this weird kind of shadow that follows him, which is the fact that Wyatt Langford went next, which even on draft night had a lot of Tiger fans very upset. But with Clark, the guy's he's got, I think, a 417 on base in high A right now, and he's 20 years old. Like, that's all great. The power numbers, while he has homered in back-to-back games as of the time of this recording, have not been exactly up to par with where they expected them to be. And so there's, I'm not going to say within the organization, but amongst the fan base, a little bit of concern regarding how high his ceiling might be at the big league level. What's your current assessment of Max Clark almost 2 years into his minor league development?
Yeah, I mean, I still view him pretty positively. I think, not to compare him to McGonigal because they're very different players, but there are more tools there, I would say, with Clark. He plays a premium position and will stick at said premium position for the entirety of his career. I think it's fair to wonder a little bit how much power he'll eventually get to, but when you talk about, sort of this adjustability aspect, in guys, making progress and taking necessary steps in their professional career, I've been impressed with Clark, with the adjustments he's made to his approach, some tweaks to his stance and operation that have paid off in the hitability department and the swing decisions department. I think he honed in on, again, seeing shapes and seeing spin and working at it. This past off season, he made some stance and operation tweaks that have paid dividends as well. So the ability for a young kid to do that at 19, 20 years old stands out to me. But I do sort of question how much power he'll eventually get to, but the tool set and skill set with him is still really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who's talked to him, we've had him on the show before, like really intelligent player too. Just like a guy who's constantly learning, constantly changing. I mean, he was more frustrated about his first like half year of pro ball than most of us were. I mean, it was right after he got drafted, and I just kind of viewed it as a wash. He made some serious adjustments. Last question here, and this does go back to the draft, but assuming everything goes right, and you never know with injuries and stuff like that, in your mindset, what player in this upcoming draft has the best major league career?
Ooh, man, that's a tough question. Oh, I think there are a lot of guys who have the ceiling and upside to be a potential impact big leaguer. Man, there are a number of guys at the prep level, like obviously starting with Ethan Holiday. The bloodlines are elite. The tools are really, really loud. He's got a body like his dad, Matt, sort of unlike Jackson in that regard.
Yeah.
Eli Willits is a really good player. Collegiately, Ivar Arquette, you could argue, is the top position player in this year's college class. But long-winded answer short, I'll go with Cade Anderson from LSU. I've sort of been beating the Cade Anderson SP1 drum for a few months now, so I'm happy he's made me look at least a little smart. But as I said earlier in the podcast, it's increasingly hard. It's gotten increasingly more difficult, I should say, to poke a hole in his game and poke a hole in his profile. And we kind of ran through it when you asked about who would help their stock in the College World Series. But you talk about a left-handed starter, slam dunk starter at that, with projection remaining, high level command, the quality of strikes are impressive. 3+ pitches and an above average pitch in his fastball. There's a whole lot of what you look for there. And I think another nice cherry on top, like the how he does it, the delivery with him is really smooth, easy, repeatable, low maintenance and under control. So I think he has the upside to be a future number 1 or number 2 starter in a big league rotation, and a good one at that.
Well, he put on a showcase in Omaha. That's a huge step in the right direction, getting that national exposure. LSU, obviously, national brand at the college level, developed a whole lot of great pitchers in the past, not just Skeens, but we're talking Aaron Nola came from there. I mean, they've had some legit studs. So interesting stuff, Peter. This is your first time on the show. I really appreciate it. We will have you back. Maybe make this an annual thing before every draft, because I appreciate the insight that you provided, man. And thanks for coming on Chris and Company.
Thanks so much for having me on. It was a blast.
That was a lot of fun, and I really do like asking non-Detroit-based people questions about the Tigers farm system or about the Tigers player development, because they're not going to sugarcoat anything. They don't have any sort of allegiance, and based on what I asked about the current crop of players, I mean, it's hard not to be super excited hearing the way that guys talk about Max Clark, but even more so, especially Kevin McGonigal at this point. I mean, it's crazy he's only in high A ball, because the excitement level for his call-up, it's going to exceed Green. It's going to exceed Torkelson. He is going to be, I think there's a legit chance he could be the top prospect in baseball, at the very least, the top hitting prospect in baseball by the time he gets called up. And right now it's nothing but glowing things, especially in regards to the bat. There's a lot to be excited about with him. And I appreciate Peter coming on here and giving us a good interview. Always fun to talk baseball. It is, no pun intended here, kind of my fastball. So always an enjoyable time. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, get those watch hours up. Finally, you see, you do get a little bit of my face here in the intro and the outro. So, that way we appeal to everybody. If you want to listen to us in audio form, find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify and at Castellani 2014 on Twitter. And of course, CastellaniContent.com. There is your one-stop shop for everything that Austin and I create. It's getting updated every single day, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate all your support. And I appreciate Peter coming on here and giving us a good interview. We're going to continue to roll these out. We have not missed a week in so long. I mean, we took the holiday break. That doesn't count. It's been coming up on a year, I think, since we've had like a week off here on Chris and Company. That is something, as an independent podcast and an independent interview podcast, is something that I'm really proud of. I'm going to stop talking about it now because I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to create a curse where we're skipping weeks, but that is a testament to Austin especially, and also my consistency of just trying to get as many guests as possible. And hey, if you know somebody in media or somebody that you think would be fun, let us know. Tell them, spread the word about Chris and Company. We want to get as many guests on as possible. We've really been, casting a pretty wide net here, and it's been a lot of fun. So thank you for all your continued support. Thank you again to Peter. I will be back here with future episodes going forward. I'll talk to y'all real soon. Have a great rest of your week. Peace and happiness.
It's an unfair game. We got to think differently.